Hey everybody, welcome back to another Making the Game from concept to Kickstarter. I'm your host Reece, and in this podcast we talk about the process of developing our game Bloodthrone, which is still available for backing via GameFound in the backer kit. And we go over the process of taking an idea for a tabletop game and how we went from that all the way to the Kickstarter production, distribution, and beyond. So first of all, thank you so much for your patience. I had a bunch of life stuff come up. I was out of the country for almost a month. My wife and I went on a vacation. We met on a cruise. So we went on the same cruise 2 years later as our honeymoon. And then we were out of the country with some medical stuff. Nothing major. It's actually exciting. I'll share it in the future, but some stuff we had to take care of. So I was away from home for quite a while. And then, of course, came back and it was Christmas. And then now we're getting ready for our big convention, the Las Vegas Open, which if anybody wants to come to, they should. It's super fun. It's in, obviously, Las Vegas, and I'll be there in a couple of days, actually, getting ready to do it. So anybody who is around and wants to come check out Bloodthrone, they can do so. I will be manning the booth at the event, along with some of the people that help playtest it. So feel free to come on by if you want to. So we're going to jump back into the in-depth series. This time we're going to talk about the Rogue. And then really quickly as an aside, I posted a lengthy general December update that gave a full update on where we're at with the development of the game. I've been working the whole time, even though I've been gone. I haven't been able to do as much media stuff. But in a nutshell, go read that article if you want the full update. But in a nutshell, we are behind schedule. We're not massively behind schedule, but we are. I really wanted to hit it on time for the first one, but that's not possible, unfortunately. But the vast majority of the reason why we're running behind schedule is because we've improved the quality of the game, specifically the presentation. Done like a little bit of tweaking here and there on the rules, but the game itself was basically done. We added art to all the cards. There's hundreds of them. We added a ton of art to the book, to the first book, and then the hero expansion book is like seriously turning into like a D&D like source book. It's like, it's huge. It's really big. There's a ton of lore and background, like massive amount in it, and tons of art. Because with the extra time, the 2D art studio that we work with, they just kept pumping stuff out. I was like, why not? Right? So the quality of the product is going to look much better. So anyway, go read that article for the full thing. I don't want to take up too much time on this because we're here to talk about the Rogue. So let's go ahead and dive in. So the Rogue it's one of the, in my opinion, it's kind of like one of the big three classes in fantasy gaming. So you've got the Warrior, Wizard, and the Rogue. Those are sort of like the three quintessential archetypes. Now, there's a bajillion sub-archetypes and then combinations between those. But generally speaking, in fantasy gaming, those are the big three. Like for example, in Skyrim, not that that's definitive or anything, it's just a game everyone has played probably a million times. Those are like the three archetypes, right, that you go with. And if you go back all the way back in fantasy gaming, that's basically it. You know, you had in Redbox D&D, if my memory is correct, it's like you had the Fighting Man, the Rogue, and the Wizard. And then the Wizard, that encompassed a healer, like a cleric as well. So those are kind of like the three core archetypes. And that's where we started. We started with the Fighter and the Rogue, and then we had a wizard type character, although we don't have a wizard specifically in the game yet, although it is coming. The Rogue itself, it was something that we really wanted to get right, like, because you need that distinction between the frontline fighter, armor, shield, sword, you know, the knight in shining armor, the wizard hurling fireballs or healing, and then the Rogue who's sneaky, and often within that archetype of a Rogue, you have like the archer and all these other sort of like subtypes, you know, like a duelist and all this fun stuff. Basically, it's an archetype that emphasizes tricks, movement, but they can still hit really hard. So the nice thing about that in developing the game, even in the very, very early stages when we didn't even really know, like, oh, we're going to use D10s, D20s, what are we going to do? We were still just like conceptualizing it. We got the Rogue right. I swear, like, it felt like on the first try. Like everyone that was playtesting the game was like, the Rogue feels roguey, you know, for lack of a better word. And it was like, yeah, it was right on the money. Like the Rogue felt like a Rogue almost immediately. And we leaned into a lot of the quintessential archetypal abilities of the rogue because it's what you would expect, right? Like you don't always have to go crazy and totally reinvent the wheel. A lot of the times, giving people what they want is the right choice in a high fantasy game like this. So the rogue came together really quickly, and throughout the course of playtesting, it was really just like fine tuning their abilities within the mechanics of the game, right? Like their core suite of abilities came together really quickly. There was only a couple that I really had to like spend some time thinking about to just to give them some variety. So the rogue specializes primarily in mobility. So as a quick reminder, in Bloodthrone, you have 12 classes, right? And so in the core box, you have 12 heroes. They're each distinct. They each have a very defined role. And we break it down into archetypes. Broadly speaking, there are 3 archetypes. There's martial characters that go and fight the enemy, and they do damage with physical attacks. You have arcane classes that are your wizards, your priests, things of this nature. They're not good at physical combat usually, and they tend to stay back, and then they cast spells. And then you have skill classes, and the skill classes in Bloodthrone are those classes that have some sort of a shtick. They do something that's unique to them, like the bard has magical songs, the alchemist throws potions and bombs, and they have their own like little unique thing that they do, and they're kind of in between the two. So within that framework, the rogue is a martial class. Clearly, like they're going out and they're doing damage, right? So that's how they fit within it. So the sub-archetype within martial that they fulfill is mobility. That's their primary defining characteristic. So every faction as we go forward will have a class that emphasizes mobility. But in order for it to not feel like the same from faction to faction as we go forward, because we have, a ton of factions planned out, is that the way that each individual class within the faction fulfills that mobility role will differ, right? So, for example, the rogue is on the iconoclast half of the core box factions. The adherence to Zenith, the quote unquote good guys, in the expansion, they get the monk. The monk is the mobility class for them. So whereas the rogue he expresses this idea of mobility via stealth primarily, the monk does it through physical acrobatic ability, right? Like he can like flip over you and do all this fun stuff, whereas the rogue is like sneaking around. So they both have the ability to move around the board freely. However, they do it in a different way. And so as we go forward, our imagination is the limit, and we'll love player feedback on this too. Like, for example, there's a faction that's got an undead theme. Perhaps they could, turn into mist or bats, like a vampire does in classical fantasy literature. Like they could have wings. There's a million ways to go about it. So that's just a quick aside, so that you can understand like how we're going to go forward and maintain balance and parity between the factions. So no matter what your faction is, you can count that one class will have mobility, and then they'll have other unique skill sets that make them feel different. So anyway, the rogue is all about stealth, mobility, DPS or dealing damage, and then they can also apply a lot of status effects, which felt appropriate. So much like the ranger in terms of equipment restrictions, the rogue, while a martial character, has a lot of equipment restrictions, and this will make sense as I explain it. So in a nutshell, the rogue is restricted to only light equipment, right? So you're not going to have a rogue with plate mail and a Zweihander sword, because as funny as it would be to have a guy sneaking around with a two-handed sword and plate, just doesn't really make sense, and it doesn't feel very rogue-like. And in a game like Bloodthrone, which I've said many times, where it's a party-based, class-based game, you want you want any individual hero to be very easily identifiable as to what it is, right? If he's got a staff and a wizard hat, probably a wizard. If he's got plate mail and a sword, he's probably a fighter or a paladin, right? So we want that. It's important for making the game easy to play to do it that way. So the rogue is limited to light equipment, but within that framework, they have quite a bit of flexibility, and I'll go into that. So light equipment encompasses things like rapiers, daggers, stilettos, hand crossbow, a flintlock, pistol, light armor or cloth armor, light shield. So the rogue's always going to have like equipment that's not going to impede their ability to sneak around. And it still gives them a lot of flexibility, right? So the way most people play the rogues in playtesting when you're making a custom one is to dual wield, like dual daggers, dual stilettos. The rogue that comes in the core box down in has a rapier and a parrying dagger, and I'll explain that later, why that's a cool combo. The rogue cannot take a ranged weapon in their main hand, and we did that because in playtesting it got really broken. Because the rogue would go stealth with 2 pistols and then backstab you with a shot and then go stealth again. It was super annoying. They still can take a ranged weapon in their offhand, so you can still kind of do it. It's just not as crazy as it was. And then the rogue can also go a single one-handed weapon. Well, pretty much anybody can do that, but there's a level 1 feat. It allows you to simply focus on using a one-handed weapon like a musketeer, and it gives you a bunch of bonuses to offset the fact that you're not using anything in your offhand, right? So in a game like this where you only have 2 item slots, basically your main hand, offhand, or equipment slots, plus your armor, giving one up, you just would never do it unless you had a bunch of bonuses to offset that. So we wanted you to be able to make a character like a musketeer that just has a single rapier, and it's still good. It doesn't feel like a stupid decision. Or, for example, if you wanted a character from the Shin Empire who just has a single katana, right? Like, Miyamoto Musashi, well, that example, he famously used 2, but like, some sort of a samurai-style character that just has a single katana, you could do that and you won't feel dumb for doing it. Like, you get a bunch of bonuses that offset not using that other hand. And then you could go melee weapon, ranged weapon. So if you wanted like a swashbuckler style rogue, that maybe like a rapier or a saber of some type and a flintlock for like a pirate theme or something like that, you could do that. And then lastly, if you wanted to make it more of like a fencer style rogue that had like a rapier and a light shield, you could do that. And then you can make more of a defensive build, which the rogues actually have quite a few defensive feats available to them, so that you can make them surprisingly resilient if you want to, although defense is not their main focus. So within that framework of being restricted to light equipment, there's still a ton of different ways that you can play your rogue. Like, you could go a dagger in one hand and a throwing dagger in the other hand, and it'd be kind of like oh my gosh, what's his name? Machete, Danny Trejo. Danny Trejo's character in, I think it's Los Mariachis, where he has like a million throwing daggers and he's running around. It's freaking awesome. Absolutely awesome scene in the movie, for anybody who knows what I'm talking about. It might have been Desperado. It was either Desperado or Los Mariachis. I can't remember. One of those. At any rate, so despite those restrictions, because we want the rogue to look and feel like a rogue, you still can really, there's a lot of room to express creativity in creating a rogue that you want, right? It could be like the prototypical video game rogue with 2 daggers and stealth, or you could go crazy and do something totally unique. Okay, so we'll jump into their unique abilities. So the rogue's class ability, and again, as a reminder, a class ability, you always have it, no matter what. So it's the quintessential ability of every class, so you can just count on always having that available to you. For the rogue, it's backstab. Backstab is like the quintessential rogue ability, in my opinion, followed only by stealth, which I'll get to. They also have that. So backstab, it's very straightforward. As long as you attack an opponent in their rear arc, you add 2 raw damage to your damage dice pool, and it's strictly additive. It just increases your damage. It's very powerful. Now, what makes this unique in the context of Bloodthrone is, first of all, every class skill in the game is limited to 1 use per activation, except backstab. So what makes this unique is that you can use backstab up to 2 times in an activation, assuming that you have the action economy to do so. So, for example, let's say you charge an opposing model in the back, backstab him, and you have another action, you can backstab him again. This is what makes the rogue ridiculous. It makes the rogue so strong. Because especially if you're dual wielding, and you have the dual wield feat, which lets you attack with both hands as a single attack action, you get the damage from each weapon, your power, whatever that is, plus the backstab. And you can increase backstab damage with feats up to a total of 4 red dice, which is crazy. 4 red dice plus all your other damage dice. It means that, typically speaking, if a rogue backstabs almost any monster, except for like a boss monster or a monster with heavy armor, it's pink mist. Just dead, 1 shot. This is what makes the rogue so much fun to play, is that if you do it right and the rogue goes hot, they'll just go like, bing, kill one, bing, kill one, just ping-ponging around the table, just obliterating lightly armored opponents, which is what the rogue wants to go for. The rogue wants to go after anybody that has light armor. Because of the fact that they have light weapons, armor really, really takes the teeth out of their attacks. So they do not want to go fight, a tank, anybody that has like a shield or anything. Like, the rogue really, really wants to attack you with backstab where you can't defend yourself. Because again, if you're attacking someone in the rear arc, they can't block, parry, dodge, or anything. And then you get the damage bonus, obviously. So another thing to point out in Bloodthrone is that whenever you attack someone from out of their line of sight, that counts as attacking them in their rear arc. So if the rogue has hidden or invisible, which they can give themselves, and I'll get to that in a second, and they charge an opponent, even if they're standing in front of them, as long as they're outside of the detection range of that model, which usually is essentially 4 squares, you count as backstabbing them. So you move, attack, and then the stealth is removed from you afterwards, assuming your target is still alive. So there's all kinds of fun, crazy combos you can do with the rogue, and I'll get to that. But just so that we have a baseline understanding of how the mechanics work, that's how backstab works in Bloodthrone. It's pretty easy to set it up if you want to. And then, of course, there's all kinds of combos with other characters, and I'll touch on that as we go. So the primary skill tree for the rogue is mobility, as I said. And they have a lot of really, really cool abilities that allow them to move around the table, basically wherever and however they want. So first of all, at level 1, you get a skill called Dash. Dash is very simple, but it's incredibly good. It allows you to make a move action, ignoring attacks of opportunity and ignoring opposing models. So you can move through models. You can't end in the same square, obviously. But as long as you can clear them, you can move through friendly or opposing models, and you don't get free strikes against you. This is incredibly, incredibly useful because attacks of opportunity are a huge part of Bloodthrone. Like, a lot of the times you'll just move into a model and just touch them just so that you're engaging them, so that it stops them from using ranged weapons. If they try and cast a spell, you get a free strike. If they try and move away from you, you get a free strike. It's a big part of the game. And the rogue, so long as they have dash, can just ignore this. And then a rogue like Dalnin, the pre-made rogue who has movement 6, it's huge. They can fly up the table, even when your opponent or a monster thought they had them locked in place. So this makes it really easy for you to bypass screening models, to escape danger. Like, if another model gets you engaged that you don't want to fight, you can just run away. It's super, super useful. And there's a feat that comes at level 8. It's called Incredible Agility. It allows you to make a charge action with dash, which is even crazier, because you could be engaged with the model. They think that they've got you pinned. And then you're like, nope, dash, I'm going to charge your healer behind your tank and blast him. And then I'm going to go do something else after that. So it's an extremely good ability. It's one of those cards that is like a bread and butter card. It finds its way into your deck really frequently. So the next ability, also available at level 1, is Step into the Shadows. And this is the other, in my opinion, quintessential rogue ability that you'll see in any game. It allows them to basically go into stealth mode. So in Bloodthrone, it's not called stealth. It's either hidden or invisible. The difference being, if you're just hidden, your movement is halved. If you're invisible, your movement is not halved. So the reason that this works this way is because lots of models can get hidden by various means. They can have a buff put on them. They can drink a potion, or whatever the case may be. And so it's like them creeping around, right? So to distinguish the rogue, who's a stealth specialist, from other models, at level 2, they can take a feat called Shadowrunner, which lets them give themselves the invisible status instead of hidden. So this means that you can move full speed while hidden, and it's very, very good. So stealth, again, is if you or an enemy model ends a move action within short range, which is roughly 4 squares distance, of the rogue, they lose hidden or invisible. All right, so that's how that works. So you have to kind of stay away from other models if you want to stay hidden. But with Shadowrunner, it makes it pretty easy to just kind of bypass people. When you're hidden or invisible, you cannot be targeted for any actions. Now, bear in mind, that's friend or foe. So your foes won't be able to attack you at all. They can't see you. And it even means with AoE attacks, they can't hit you. I know that feels a little unrealistic, like if a bomb goes off next to you, you'd still be hit even if you were hidden. But the reason that we do it that way is that in game terms, you as the player know that model is there, even though it's supposed to be invisible. So you would just throw a bomb there and, oh, look, I hit him. So we bent the rules of believability, I guess, a little bit in order to make it actually an effective ability. You wouldn't just throw a bomb into blank space in order to hit something that might be there in reality either. So it's really, really strong, right? However, the flip side is that your allies can't see you either. So if you need to be healed or you need a buff, they won't be able to do it. So you have to keep that in mind as well. It often means that what you do is you'll buff the rogue on the first turn, and then the rogue runs off and does his own thing or her own thing for the rest of the game. So at level 4, you can also upgrade Step into the Shadows with Moving Shadow. It's a feat, class feat for the rogue. It lets you step into the shadows as a compound action. So what this means, compound actions are basically 2 standard actions that you get for the price of 1. Like charging is move and attack. Mobile casting, which is move and cast a spell. And we do that just to keep the game really quick and mobile, so you're not just like standing there doing nothing. So normally a rogue has to just burn an action and he makes himself invisible. With this feat, you move and then you turn invisible. So it just increases your action economy. It keeps the rogue moving really quick. And if you want to be a stealth specialist, this is going to be one of the, it's like Shadowrunner in this. You basically like, you almost have to take them if you want your rogue to be like, ninja mode. Finally, at level 6, you can take one with the shadows. This one's pretty crazy. It makes the detection radius go to half. So an opposing model can only remove your hidden or invisible status if they're within 2 squares. So then, if you take all 3 of these upgrades and you want your rogue to just be super stealth, man, it's pretty nuts. Like, you're moving full speed, you're moving and going invisible, and you can go basically 3 squares away. You can't be within 2 squares of an opposing model, and they still can't do anything to you. So it lets you just fly around the table being untargetable. And this is like the key bread and butter of what makes the rogue so fun to play and multifaceted. Now, we'll talk about some of the other things you can do, because instead of being sneaky, you can make them just pure offensive punch or give them more defensive abilities once they're in combat. So it just depends on how you want to play your rogue. And then the last, mobility / stealth skill tree ability that they get is their ultimate ability, which comes at level 10. As a quick reminder, the ultimate ability at level 10, you automatically put it in your deck. You don't have to use one of your class skill selections. So if you have a hero that makes it to level 10, which doesn't always happen, you just automatically get your super ability. Theirs is called Shadow Master. So this one, it's a little complex, but it's super fun. The rogue does a free throw action against every opposing model within short range around them. And it, unlike a normal throw action, if they're engaged, it doesn't matter. So it's basically like the rogue is like throwing a bomb down. Everyone around them gets blinded, or they could get blinded. You have to roll for it. And then the rogue makes a free move action, ignoring attacks of opportunity. It's like dash. And then they go invisible. So, kind of a lot going on, but basically the rogue like pops this big flashbang, blinds everybody. When you're blinded, your accuracy goes to 0. So that means when you try to make a physical attack with like a melee weapon or a bow or whatever, you get no positive modifier dice. It means it's really, really likely you're going to miss. Then the rogue can run away without taking any attacks of opportunity, and then they go invisible. So one of the ways I like to do this, obviously, if you find yourself getting swarmed by monsters or enemy models, you can do this as in case of emergency, break glass, or you can use it offensively. You dash into the middle of a bunch of enemies, pop it, and then basically dash out and turn invisible, and then debuff a ton of models. It's really, really good. The rogue's secondary skill tree is DPS, and it's got some sprinkling of status effects in there, which felt appropriate for the rogue. So at level 2, the rogue gains the really, really useful skill called Ring the Bell. So Ring the Bell doesn't do as much damage. It's a reduced damage attack. In Bloodthrone, basically, usually whenever you have an attack that also does a status effect, it will do less damage to balance it out. So the rogue sacrifices some of their damage output to apply the stunned status effect to their target. It's like they're hitting them on the head with like a sap, something like that. So stunned takes away an action from the target. Almost all models in the game have 2 actions. So where this gets crazy with the rogue is that you can stun lock a target, right? So let's say you're engaged with a model you don't want to fight, like a tanky type monster. You dash behind them, you use ring the bell, bonk them on the head, stun them, and since you can't target a model in your rear arc, that monster then will have to use its only action to turn around to face you and then do nothing because it's out of actions. And then you can just go like boop, 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 back and forward and just keep doing it as long as you don't miss. The rogue can tie up a really tough monster that way. Or take on, in PvP, take on an enemy hero and at least keep them occupied if you're not able to do a lot of damage to them. Like, for example, if you're fighting like an Ajax type character who you're really not going to do any damage to, you could just annoy him and keep him tied down. Because the attack target's the will defense, which for most martial characters, their will defense is really low. Now, in PvP, your opponent's obviously not going to just keep turning around to face you. They're going to try and figure something out. They can leave engagement, take a free strike, whatever. They'll do something to stop you from keeping them stun locked. But in PvE, it's something you can do because most monsters will, their AI chart is just to keep trying to attack the nearest enemy hero. So it'll work in that instance. Unless you're playing in a DM-controlled monster mode where the DM will likewise not follow the script and do something that will get the monster out of that situation. At level 4, the rogue gets Riposte. Riposte is a really good class skill. It's like a free attack action. So anytime you have a rogue that's built with any sort of defense in mind, this is a good choice. What this does is it allows the rogue to make a free attack action against a model whenever they block or parry against that model. You can only do it once per activation, the same with almost every class skill. But it's a free attack, it's free damage, right? So the rogue down in the box is a parrying dagger. The parrying dagger has a defensive keyword, which once per activation, you can have free parry. So you can just parry, bink, hit them back. You do have the disadvantage. You have disadvantage on the attack to balance it out, which increases the odds of missing. But still, it's like, if you have an extra class skill slot and you have a rogue that has a shield or a parrying dagger or anything like that, it's like, why not? Like once you get stuck in, you're like, parry, bonk. And it just increases the total amount of damage that the rogue is going to be doing over time. Really useful skill. At level 6, you get Serrated Blade. Serrated Blade is a really fun one. So what you'll notice is a lot of martial characters that are like melee oriented. At level 6, they'll get some sort of ranged ability. Like the fighter at level 6 gets Throw Shield, so you can like Captain America his shield and it pushes you a little bit. And it's fun. It makes them a little bit more multifaceted. It gives you some options too. So like, you don't have to take it, but you're like, oh, you know what? I would like the ability to strike out to medium range. Well, you can put this card in your deck and it's pretty frequent. Like the monk can throw a fireball. Super, super fun. It shows my Dragon Ball Z obsession, which I think you can see the painting of Brawly behind me that my wife did for me. So the rogue specifically, they throw a jagged blade. And it not only does damage out again to medium range, which is far, it also applies the bleeding status effect. The bleeding status effect is one of the gnarliest ones. You don't see it super frequently because it's really strong. So what it does is whenever the target model activates, they take 1 red die of damage, which can do up to 3 damage. And then every square they move through, they take a red die of damage. It's brutal. So when you do it to a monster, the monster running on the AI script, they're going to just do a ton of damage to themselves as they run. And in PvP, what it'll do is if you do it to a low HP target, like Wizard, or maybe like a Bard or someone who doesn't have a ton of HP, a lot of times they'll just have to sit there and not move, or they might kill themselves just walking forward. It's a really, really strong status effect. And also the class skill targets Fortitude, which for the support characters, a lot of times their fortitude isn't very high. So it's a really, really good card to put in the Rogue's deck if you want to have that long range option. Finally, at level 8, you get Shadow Strike. Shadow Strike is nuts. It's just really good. You have to be hidden or invisible to use this skill, basically backstabbing. But when you do, they turn all of their damage dice into red dice. So it's like, it's crazy because when you're doing this, you're gonna be doing like 10 or more red dice to your opponent. It's basically a one-shot, one kill against anything that's not a boss monster or a hero that has a lot of HP, because red dice can't be blocked, they can't be parried, and they ignore armor. So this is a once per game ability, obviously, otherwise it would be incredibly broken. But at level 8, put this one in your deck and you're like, that thing is going to die. So in PvP though, just be wary that your opponent is going to absolutely be trying to block this power, because it typically just, it one-shots whatever you use it against, unless you roll really, really, really badly. Oh, it automatically hits too. Did I forget to mention that? The tertiary skill tree for the rogue is burgling, stealing stuff. Again, I would say with backstab, stealth, disarming traps, and opening locks and stuff is the other thing that rogues are known for in RPGs. That's like their trifecta of core abilities. So we had to put something in there for the rogue to feel roguey, to not just feel like he was like an assassin or something like that. So the rogue at level 1 can take lockpicks. It's a no-frills, very straightforward ability, but it lets you disarm the trap and open the lock on a chest automatically. So you don't have to worry about failing the roll, because if you fail the roll in Bloodthorn, it's really bad. The trap explodes, you take a bunch of damage, and then you have to use another action to then open the chest. It's a double whammy. So the rogue, if you want to build a rogue that just goes around winning the game, you just maximize your stealth, fly around getting all the objectives, right? And then your rogue will be not doing very much damage, but they'll win you the game. It's a totally viable way to build them. Just the only downside is you miss out on the insane levels of damage that a rogue can do if you build them to backstab. So it's just, that's the question you have to ask yourself with what you want your rogue to do. Of course, you can do a mix of both of those things. You don't have to focus on one or the other. But lockpicks let your rogue act like, the burgling expert that they also should be. All right, let's jump into the feats. We already covered a bunch of them, so we'll just breeze through this. But basically, the rogue's feats, again, as a quick reminder, you have general feats available at odd levels, including level 1, which everybody can take. And then at even levels, you have class-specific feats, so, except for level 10 when you get your ultimate ability. So at every juncture, whether it's a general feat or a class feat, you can only take one of the options and it's permanent. So you want to think it through. You want to think about what kind of build you're going for with your hero. So the rogue, the 2 feat trees, one path emphasizes stealth, the other emphasizes DPS and defense, right? So we'll dive in. At level 2, you can either take Shadowrunner, which I covered, lets you move full speed while stealth, or Backstabber, which increases your backstab damage +1. So you would go from 2 to 3 red dice. At level 4, you can take Moving Shadow, which I covered. You can move and go into stealth as one action. Or you can take Defensive Fencer. This one lets you re-roll results of Skull, the Skull result on block dice when you're blocking or parrying. So the Skull result doesn't block any damage. So what this does is it increases the amount of damage that you will block every time you try to defend yourself. It's very good. At level 6, you can take One with the Shadows, which again, that reduces the detection radius to 2 squares from 4. Or you can take Master Backstabber, which gives you an additional +1 raw dice to your backstab. That means if you took both upgrades, you would be doing 4 red dice of damage with your backstab on top of all your normal damage. It's like, it gets really, really crazy. 4 red dice is a lot. It's a lot. Level 8, you can take Incredible Agility, which lets you charge with dash, which I already explained. Or you can take Lightning Reflexes, which means you do not gain disarmed after parrying or hobbled after blocking. So whenever you parry with a weapon, after you're done parrying all the attacks that come in, you can only parry against one target model. You gain disarmed, meaning you can't attack with that weapon in the next activation. And it's to make parrying not as good as blocking. So if you if you take a dedicated shield, you can block as many attacks as are possible, including ranged. Excuse me, including ranged attacks. So, because parrying had to be significantly worse than blocking, otherwise you would never take a shield, you would just take another weapon. So that's the penalty for parrying. And then blocking, you gain the hobbled status after blocking, which means you move half speed. It's to represent the fact that you're like concentrating on defending yourself with your shield so that you're not moving full speed. So then this rule lets you ignore both of those things. So it's really, really good. It increases your defense pretty dramatically as a rogue if you want to make him a little bit harder to kill, because rogues are definitely a glass cannon. They have high base evasion, but they have low HP. So if you want your rogue to stick around a little bit longer, this is a good option. So playing Dalnin, the dashing specifically, first of all, Dalnin was one of the most fun characters to create when we were going through this process. He came together really, really, really easily in my mind. It was kind of like Ajax. Like I had a very clear picture of what this character was going to be. So Dalnin he's a pirate. He comes from the Seaborn faction. The Seaborn, they live in what's called the Sharktooth Archipelago. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's an archipelago. It's tropical. It's a mix of like pirate, privateer, and then Pacific Islander influenced themes. So as you'll see, he has like Maori style tattoos. They're not exactly that. They're just inspired by that. He's like a swashbuckling, braggadocio, full of swagger pirate. Came together really easily when we were writing the characters. That one was just like, yeah, we got it. We basically modeled him off of a more competent Han Solo type of a character. A little bit more of a ruthless Han Solo type of character, but he has that same sort of sardonic wit, devil may care attitude. But way deep down, way down deep, he might have some redeeming qualities to him, but he's extremely competent. So as you're playing the game, his character has a lot of character. He's always cracking jokes and being very sarcastic, etc. It was a fun character to write. And I've touched on it before, but he's a sea elf. So all elves in Bloodthrone, first of all, they're really reflective of the environment they come out of, right? So we have, we call them heritages, but races that are more like on the magical side of things, whereas humans would be more on the kind of like mundane side. The races that are more sort of fey, for lack of a better term, they will really strongly reflect the environment that they come out of, right? And it's all a part of the lore of the game as to why. So sea elves live obviously close. They live their lives near or on the water, and then their appearance reflects that. So sea elves have their skin is the color of the water, from all the different hues. It can be light blue to dark blue to shades of light green, and their hair tends to be white, light blue, etc. It's like the white caps on a wave is the inspiration for it. They kind of look like old school dark elves a little bit, but that wasn't really what we were going for. They're supposed to look like the ocean. And elves in Bloodthrone, they're not like near immortal. It's not like, in Lord of the Rings where they're like 3,000 years old or etc. In Bloodthrone, we really wanted to go for a mix of real world, scientific basis like physics, and obviously with a strong mix of magic, but the magic had rules to it, right? So in the world of Bloodthrone, no sentient creature can live beyond 120 years. And furthermore, anything that's like any creature that's like really fast, whether that be a high metabolism, quick reflexes, are really fast, they fly, all these different things, they're burning hot, and so they don't live a really long time, right? Which is reflected in the world that we live in. Things that move slow, have a slow metabolism, but not running around going 100 miles per hour, they live a lot longer, right? Just like on Earth, right? Like a turtle can live a really long time, whereas a hummingbird does not. So elves live fast, die young, leave a pretty corpse, right? They're burning hot. And in Bloodthrone, they stay really attractive until the very end, and then it just all kind of falls apart, and then they go into the final years of their life and they die. But they often don't even go past 60, in Bloodthrone. Whereas dwarves, who are, slower metabolism, slower of action, and in the game terms, they move slower, they take their time making decisions, etc. dwarves are the longest lived of the heritages of the races in Bloodthrone. So it was just kind of something fun I thought I would touch on because it's reflective of how we're different from the quintessential high fantasy setting. So anyway, sea elves, they live in and around bodies of water, predominantly in the Sharktooth archipelagos where they come from. Their heritage ability, it's fun. It's called Poison Dart. They can do once per game, they can do a free throw action where they hit you with a little dart that poisons you. And it's really, really good for finishing off an opposing model that's low on HP. Poison, as a quick refresher for those who don't know or don't remember, when a model activates for the next 2 turns, they take raw damage. And so it's guaranteed to do at least 3 raw damage over 2 turns. Usually will finish off anyone who's low on HP. So just kind of fun. Kind of reflects their freewheeling, chaotic, piratical background. So Downen himself is equipped with Stealth Garb. Stealth Garb doesn't offer any physical protection. It's the lightest armor, well, second lightest. When you're creating your own hero, you can opt to take no armor at all, and you just get an HP bonus. It's called Natural Vitality. It's a fun option if you want like a Conan the Barbarian guy who's just going into battle in his furry underwear or whatever. But Downen is wearing Stealth Garb. Stealth Garb increases your evasion, so it's a nice trade-off. It just makes you increasingly harder to hit. And then he's equipped with a rapier and a parrying dagger. So this specific combo is really fun. Again, he has the dual wield feat, which lets him attack with both melee weapons as a single attack action. The rapier has the keyword Deep Wounds. So what Deep Wounds does is when you're rolling damage, one face on the damage die is a 2 swords, which does 2 damage, but it's red. All the other symbols are black. The Deep Wounds keyword lets you turn those into 3 damage. So what it does is it increases the average amount of damage that you're doing and the total potential damage that you're doing. Really, really good. Like a Battle Axe also has that keyword. So it just means he's going to be doing, on average, more damage than you would otherwise. Parrying Dagger, as I've already said, it gives you the defensive keyword. The defensive keyword lets you get 1 free parry action. So normally you can only parry against one opponent. So what this does is you could parry again against a different opponent just 1 time, or you can just do one for free, right? So it just gives him a little bit of a way to mitigate damage at least once, because he doesn't have very many HP, he only has 14. It just gives him a little like, I need to lower the amount of damage I'm taking. So very useful combo of weapons, and it looks cool too. Like the rapier and the parrying dagger looks really, really, really cool, especially for a pirate. So Downen also, as I said, he's an elf. Elves have base movement 6, so the fastest of the heritages in the game. Humans are 5 and the dwarves are 4. So this lets him fly around the tabletop. His armor doesn't slow him down at all. His equipment's all really light. So he's very mobile. Like he can really just kind of go everywhere you need him to be. To further increase his mobility, to crank it up to an 11, I often give him a grappling hook. A grappling hook is just a really simple item card, equipment card that you can take from the merchant stall. Once you've built the merchant stall in your base, he's the vendor. Like you can buy and sell stuff from him. And he has a deck of cards that are like your basic equipment, like healing potions, yada, yada, yada. The grappling hook, cheap, cool, super effective. And what it does is once per game, you activate it, and then the bearer of the grappling hook ignores vertical distance. So that may not sound that cool, but you have to remember every single map in Bloodthrone is 3D. And going up, vertical distance eats up your movement points. And then going down also eats up your movement points unless you opt to jump off, in which case you take damage, but you can do that. The grappling hook makes you treat the whole map as 2-dimensional. So depending on where you're at, or like you're trying to go over a tower or a wall or whatever, this can make Downen go insanely far across the board. It's really, really, really strong. Plus, the mental image of this pirate swinging around on a rope from building to building like Spider-Man makes me laugh. So I really enjoy that combo with the rogue, or any fast-moving model. Really, it's very effective. So again, like I said, Downen hits like a truck. He has power 3, which is almost max. 4 is max, and he has 2 weapons that do 3 damage each. So assuming he charged, he's going to be doing 10, he's going to be throwing 10 damage dice, which is a lot. It's a lot. It's 3 for each weapon because he's dual wielding and do both. 3 for his power, 1 for the charge bonus. And then if you're backstabbing someone, if you're in the rear arc, assuming you haven't upgraded the backstab, you're adding 2 more red dice. So he just explodes things if you can line it up and do it correctly, and get in the rear arc, which is like critical for the rogue to be maximally effective. And if you can start doing that, Downen will just ping pong from doom, 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 just smashing things. It's really fun when it works. On the flip side, Downen has no armor. He only has 14 HP. His constitution stat is 0, which in Blood Throne, 0 just means average. It doesn't mean bad. It just means you're not exceptionally resilient. So in game mechanics terms, what that means is he gets no bonus HP, and then every time he levels up, or every time he gains HP, which is every odd level, he's only gaining 1 HP. So quintessential glass cannon. He hits hard. He's accurate with his weapons, with accuracy of 3. However, you really don't want him to get hit. Now, he is evasion 6, which is high. Evasion 6 is high enough where frequently monsters will be missing you. But it's not so high that you can't really rely on it. You don't want Downen to get hit in the first place. Like, if you're playing him correctly, he's not even getting attacked. Because all he has is his evasion and his parrying dagger. He's pretty squishy. If anything, you get their hands on him. The biggest mistake I see people make when they're playing a rogue, especially a rogue like Downen that's equipped for offense, not defense, is they get a little bloodthirsty, and then on turn 1, they're like, oh, I'm going to fly up the table and just blast something. You can do that, but then the problem is that all the other monsters or opposing heroes that haven't activated yet, they're just going to swarm you and knock you out, and then that's it. So, in my opinion, unless you kit out a rogue to be really, really, really hard to hit, which you can do, you can get a rogue up to maximum evasion, or nearly maximum evasion on turn 1 if you build it correctly. And then it's just extremely difficult to actually hit them. However, for most rogue builds, that's not the way you're going to do it. What's the smarter play is to either run up a flank and hide, like go behind terrain and wait, or to use stealth to just make yourself invisible and then let the game develop for a turn or even 2, and then go in and go hard. Another thing that bears mentioning, a tactic that works particularly well with Downen specifically, is to use the delay action, which delay action is a general action that's available to anybody, but only one member of your party can do it. So one member of your party can burn one action to wait for everyone else to go, and then they go at the end with their second action. So now why this bears special mentioning with Downen? Because the benefit is obvious. You get to see what everybody else does, and then you act. Right? So that's obvious. The reason why it's so good with Downen is that his equipment is so light that he has no initiative penalty, so he's initiative 8, which everything defaults to initiative 8 as a baseline. And then your equipment makes it go down from there. So Downen's second general feat, so dual wields his main, or his first, his second is called Blinding Speed. Blinding Speed gives you +2 initiative, and it lets you rotate in place as a simple action. So that means Downen's initiative 10, which is ludicrous. That means in almost every single game you will ever play, Downen will be at the top of the initiative order. Now, normally that's great. He gets to go before everybody else does. On the first turn, however, it's not always great, because you go and then everybody else reacts to you. So what you can do with Downen is delay on the first action, let everybody else go, then you take an action, the turn clicks over to turn 2, now you're going first. So you went last and you went first. So in that specific scenario on turn 1, it's a good choice for him because he basically gets 3 uninterrupted actions in a row, which, could be really, really crazy. It also counts as 2 different activations, so you get all your special abilities and everything reset from turn 1 to turn 2. So that's a fun little trick that you can also contemplate doing with Downen, specifically because of all the upgrades he has. Also bears mentioning the ability to rotate in place as a part of Blinding Speed, which is a general feat. Anyone can take it when you're creating your custom hero. A huge part of playing Blood Throne effectively is model positioning. So if somebody's behind you, you can't do anything to them usually, unless you have some special ability. So you have to use an action to turn around to do anything to them. The ability to rotate in place as a simple action is really, really good, particularly for a martial class. They don't use their simple actions that frequently. So for Dowling, he's like, yeah, whatever, I'll give up my simple action, I'll turn around. Now I can act on you with 2 actions. So it's a surprisingly good ability that often gets overlooked if you're not really familiar with the rules. So when playing against Dowling in PvP, the thing you want to be really wary of is speed and stealth, right? So the rogue is purpose-built to try and get through the linebacker, the screening units, the tank units, and kill wizards and healers and skill-based classes. Anything that has low armor is where the rogue will blender them. So that's obviously what your opponent's going to be trying to do with Dowling. So you want to be thinking, okay, how do I take away their stealth if they're using stealth? Or how do I counter them if they're trying to flank me? Because remember, in PvP, the model with the highest initiative deploys last. So Dowling is get to see where everybody else deploys, and then he gets to counter deploy you. It's very, very good in PvP. So you get to see every other model on the table, and you're like, oh, I'm going to go in the most advantageous position for me. So you're going to want to think about, how do I counter the speed and potentially the stealth? One of the things I like to do is go through, like, use a summoned unit like the Forest Guardian or the Bear. The Forest Guardian specifically is very, very good at it because he has high movement. Throw him at the rogue just to take away the stealth. As soon as you get within 4 squares, take it off, and then you can hit him with a long range attack or anything that can slow him down, like that hobbles him, stuns him, paralyzes him. That's brutal for the rogue. And then it gives you time to react and send something over there to try and bop him. Because again, as soon as you can see Dowling, it's pretty easy to take him out in most cases. Downing's Fortitude and Will aren't great. Fortitude is 2, if I remember correctly. So not great. If you can hit him with anything that targets Fortitude, like poison, any kind of body control ability, that's going to usually be very effective against him. So that's another thing you want to keep in mind, is look at your class skills. Anything that targets Fortitude is going to be more effective against someone like Dowling. So there you have it. The Rogue, super fun, surprisingly flexible given the limitations of the class. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. They're just fun. They're fun to play. Sometimes you run in, you make a mistake, and they get bopped on turn 1, and you're like, well, that wasn't great. And then sometimes they fly around a flank, take out like 3 or 4 enemies, and then go grab an objective to win the game. And then they're the MVP. So they're a high skill cap class. Easy to make a mistake, but once you get the hang of them, extremely satisfying to play. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Good to be back. Bear with me. We're going to be at the LVO. We're leaving on the 15th. Today's the 13th that I'm recording. Leaving on the 15th. Obviously, I won't be able to do anything when I'm there. It's going to be full engagement while I'm there. And then my wife and I are immediately going out of the country again for some of this medical stuff, which is nothing to be concerned about. It's all positive. It's good stuff. It's stuff we just have to take care of. I'll share details in the future as it's appropriate. But I don't know if I'll be able to record anything while I'm gone. I will be diligently working every day. But you may not hear from me for a couple weeks in this format. So just please bear with me. Once I'm back from this trip, which will be in early Feb, it'll be business as usual going forward.